Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey of My Mother's Son podcast. Today, I'm joined with Margaret Agard, who's an award-winning author, former executive in the high-tech industry, a mother of 8 children, and stepmother to 7 children, which is a story all in its own, I'm sure. She is in the process of writing her 3rd memoir, and we're really going to talk a lot about how she pretty much gave her to-do list to God. Margaret, thanks for joining me today.
Good to be with you, Dan. Been looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So before we get started, just give my guests a little bit deeper of an intro as to who Margaret is today.
Well, today I have become an author, and I have retired from the high tech industry, and I at one point was a single mom when I started this. And so one of the surprises in store for me was that I remarried. It wasn't on my 20-year plan. But once I started turning my to-do list over to God, my plans changed. And it turned out I got this great, great life that I never even knew I would love until I had it.
Isn't that incredible how, like I said, we come up with a plan and it doesn't necessarily match? Because if you would have talked to me in 2018 and said that in a couple of years I would be following my mother's footsteps and traveling around the country in an RV and volunteering and meeting new people and reconnecting with old friends and family, I'd have said nope. As a matter of fact, I did have that conversation with my cousin in Orlando, Florida in 2019, which was one of the trips that inspired me to do this, where we were coming back from an event and she said to me, she says, I can see you doing what your mom did someday. And I was like, not a chance, Patty, not a chance. It's just not, that was her story, not my story. But boy, didn't God have some other plans for us? And
Yeah.
I fought it. It was actually when I got back from that trip to Orlando. That was the second trip I had taken solo, one to Texas and one to Orlando, where it was the first time in my life I enjoyed the journey. And I got back and I started hearing this voice, hey, it's time to start a new chapter.
Yeah.
And I did not want to hear it. I did not want to embrace it. I loved what I did. That's one of the things I tell people all the time is that, it wasn't like I was working in some dead end 9 to 5, hate your job life.
Right.
I was doing fulfilling and good work for kids in our community. And when he first started talking to me and said, yeah, it's time for a new chapter, didn't want to hear it. Didn't want to hear it
So
even a
funny.
little
It's
bit.
like trying to convince that toddler he really is going to like ice cream. I'm telling you, you like it. Just take that first bite. Yeah.
So that's why, when I reached out to you about having you on the show and looking at giving God that to-do list and what you just kind of, reaffirmed there of, you know, your 20-year plan and his 20-year plan, I really wanted to sit down and talk to you about it. So tell me a little bit about, um, you know, did you embrace his plan initially, or were you like,
It sort of was a transition. I had first started learning to hear his voice in my 20s, and I often would just get little promptings, call this person, go here, do that. But in my 40s, I was divorced and a single mom, and I had, still 8 children. Some were in college, but they were still living at home. Some were in junior high, high school. And I had decided to finish up my degree because in the high tech industry, during that time period, a lot of companies were going public. And, if you're in the executive level, they want to show your, what makes you look good.
right?
So I was finishing up that degree. And so it wasn't that I didn't have enough to do when I started this, because I had way too much to do. Being an executive, going to school full time, having 8 children, all of those things, any one of those things would have been a full-time job, more than full-time. And so as an executive, I knew how to set priorities, but it didn't matter. There were too many priorities at that point. And so that's when I started noticing that sometimes I did things that were on my priority list, but when the time came, it turned out that something had changed. I would write a paper, and at that point you actually turned in your paper, wasn't over the computer. And I would get to class and there'd be a note on the door, the professor's sick, wait till next week to turn in the paper. And I think, well, I could have used that 3 or 4 hours to do something else. And yeah, or the same way with a client, I'd put a proposal together and I'd come in, oh, no, we've changed everything about it. So we're going to have to redo the proposal. I mean, I could have not done the proposal. And so I started thinking, if I only could see the future. And then I thought, well, I know someone who can see the future. And so that's when I started writing down my to-do list and then going to God and saying, well, what do I really have to do today? And that was the prayer I started with. What do I really have to do today? And at that time, I was maybe getting 4 or 5 hours sleep a night. And I often woke up in the middle of the night, just frantically anxious, thinking, what did I not get done? What did I not get done? And so after I'd been turning my to-do list over to God and started doing only what he said to do, I was finished every night by around 8 o'clock. I could relax. I stopped worrying. If it wasn't on the to-do list from God, I honestly didn't have to worry about it. That's what something was going to happen. It wouldn't have to get done. And so eventually that morphed from what do I have to do today, God, to what do you want me to do today? Because he always added a couple of things that he wanted me to do. And sometimes, like with you, a big project would come up, like get an RV and start traveling, a big project. It wasn't, just take a meal to a neighbor. But a lot of what I did was take a meal to a neighbor, make a phone call. But other times there were fairly large projects, like get ready, you're going to get married again, start packing up your house. And my reaction to that was kind of like yours, like, no, thank you. But but that's when my life really began to change, when I stopped going from what do I have to do, basically to get through my day, to what do you want me to do today, God? And right now it's interesting because I used to get lots of little assignments, and right now it's focused on healing. That some things he wants me to do, I have to really be healed. And my husband and I go to the adult children program, which is for adults who grew up in dysfunctional or alcoholic or violent homes. And
Yeah,
very healing, actually.
Love that. So it's really, following his will, not so much ours, which I know a lot of people struggle with. I mean, we have our own thoughts and plans and how things should get done and how we want them to get done. And that's not always the case. That's not always his will. The other thing, one of the things that I struggle with still today is timing, because my timing and God's timing do not align very seldom.
Yes.
So, so that's one thing that he's still working on with me is, making sure that I'm trusting his timing and that, things will happen, not only how they're supposed to happen, but when they're supposed to happen. I'm very trusting in knowing that things will happen how they're supposed to happen. I don't know that I'm as trusting in that things will happen when they're supposed to happen. So,
I have had that thought, I've had that thought, like I felt like X was going to happen. X has not happened. So is that still going to happen? Or sometimes I follow his prompting and things look bad. And that isn't unusual, I have learned. In fact, that the stronger the sense is that I need to do something and the more it comes, so that the more sure I am it really is God, then often that's when at the beginning things look bad. That, I once felt like in a year I was going to be offered a job. I was living in the mountains in the Rockies and moved back to the East Coast. I grew up in New Jersey. My family was living in Virginia. And so my parents. And so we still had, we had the 8 kids, and we're talking to them in a year, sort of getting everybody ready. And then that first year, oh my gosh, the teenagers, they really struggled. And if I hadn't been so sure this is really what we were supposed to do, I would have thought, oh, we shouldn't have done this. But, and even they will say they're glad now that we made that move.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah. So, are you able to, like how do you trust his timing? Like how does that process work for you?
I often need reassurance. So I remember some of our kids go to church, some don't, and I felt like I should like fast once a week for my children, for their healing, for their returning to him. They do talk to God. Everyone, whether they go to church or not, talk to me about God and what he does in their life. But I remember going to visit, and I said to him, I've been doing this for a couple of years now. Maybe some indication that good things are happening here, that is actually going to happen. So I went to visit this one son and his wife, and he said to me as I was leaving for church on Sunday and they weren't coming, he said, my wife was thinking of going with you today. And I said, she was? He said, yeah. She was like, but she has MS and doesn't always feel well. And so as I thought, well, that was nice. She thought about it and then didn't come. And so then I was like, is that it? Is that like my indication that things are starting to shift? But sure, in a few years, they were actually very active in a church and just, committed. My son says, I like to go to church. It makes me a better father, a better man, and a better husband.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that was like, and I don't really like fasting. It's not my favorite part of when I pray. So when God's like, I want you to fast and pray for this, I'm like, well, isn't there something else I could do? Like make an extra donation? But yeah.
So at what point did you decide, or what inspired you to
So I
start
think
writing?
I'm just a minute. I'm not sure that the point got made, which is I can ask him for just a little reassurance that we still are on the right path. And I'll get it, even if it's a tiny thing like that.
Got it. No, no problem. So what was it that inspired you to start writing the memoirs?
Actually, that was God. It wasn't in my head at all. Just right after I married my second husband, the thought came that I should write my life on the internet. Now, this was back in 98, 99, and it's not like blogs were big then, like 24 years ago. I don't even think WordPress was out yet. And so I really wasn't sure how to do it. And I thought, well, I want to. And I knew how to set up a website because we were selling a product over the internet. And I did find a site called Open Diary that still exists. And I started writing on there. And after I had been writing there about a year or so, I was like, now I want you to take all that stuff you've written, look through it, and make a book. And I thought I was supposed to take it and turn it into some kind of chapters. And he said, no, this is the book. It's like my own personal chicken soup for the soul. Lots of little 1.5 page, 2-page stories that are very much what it's like to get up and say, what do you want me to do today, God? And the things that happen as a result, the times I thought, no, I don't think so. I'm not going to do that. And what happened when I did that? So, lots of, and the struggle we have. I can remember sitting down once and saying, there's this woman, I've been trying to reach out. She's not really responding. And so if she needs something, have her call me. Okay. So we can spend some time together. And I didn't really watch TV, and we were out in the mountains in California at this point during my second marriage. And we have, we still had up on the roof those like antenna thingies, just so we could get one fuzzy channel in. And so I got a channel really well, and I liked Star Trek, and it was a Star Trek, and I had never seen this particular episode. So I was really, and then she called, wanted help. And I thought, but I don't want to help her now. But I did. So, yeah.
That's great. When you first started it, um, did you know that it was going to be a series of books, or were you just thinking, okay, it's going to be one book and then we're done? It's in his footsteps and off we go.
I always saw it as three books, almost like faith, hope, and charity. And faith would be this first one that we like was giving my to-do list to him. I just had faith that whatever he asked me to do was the right thing. And and the hope one, the second one is we went and sold everything, stored a few things in storage, and served as missionaries. We were in the inner city, we were teaching in the jails, we were up in Alaska in a small village. We just were around doing stuff. And so I thought of that as hope. And then the third one, which would be charity, would be about our marriage and how that started and worked. And so, yes, I always saw it as three. I just thought I would get them finished faster. But
Yeah.
maybe because we're still married, thinking, well, but here's the ending. I need to make this the ending. Yeah.
So you're still dealing with that timing component with God as well, and when
Yeah.
they should have all been finished. Did you guys? Sounds like you guys could have lived in an RV when you're out there doing that missionary work. How did you?
We did have a truck, but we usually ended up renting a place because we'd be a place for a year and a half. We went to Alaska, and two places in Alaska we actually lived in the church or next to the church. So yeah, it was just to say it was cold in
Yeah,
Alaska, and I thought I would hate it, and I ended up loving it.
yeah,
I would say all three books are about love. When I was turning my to-do list over to God, I was often being sent to help other people. And often they were the kind of people that you think, well, they're kind of screw ups, don't you think, God? I mean, they're in this situation because they're making them bad decisions. And all I ever felt from him was his love for them.
yeah,
Until after a while, I really got how much he loves us, not just in my head, but in my heart. And so what really came from that, all those experiences, was a sense of how much he loves me. And it seems that before then, I was often doing good because I wanted him to love me. Does that make sense? I mean, anyone, if you talk to any Christian, they, oh, no, no, no. But in their heart, they really believe they're not good enough.
yeah,
Most of us, right? But I really got it. It was, I wanted now to do good so other people would feel how loved they are too.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's amazing. I mean, and a lot of what Sandy and I do now is revolved around volunteer work. And one of the places that we volunteer at, we've been there a couple times now, is a faith-based drug and alcohol rehabilitation center in Beaumont, Texas, called the Dream Center.
Okay.
And listening to the stories of those guys, and you know, amazing that they're still alive today with everything they, most of them have been through, and it truly does show, his grace, hope, and love for all of us. And I think you're right. I mean, we all struggle with the fact that, whether or not we deserve God's love.
Right.
And you're absolutely right. I don't care who anyone is. There's this internal struggle of am I good enough? And the truth is that God loves us just as we are. We are perfectly imperfect in His eyes. And it's tough to grasp that, again, until you're in a situation like that and you see what these guys have been through. And yeah, they made a lot of bad decisions in their lives, but they're alive, and now they're turning it around, and they're serving him, and it truly is, um, you know gives you incredible hope that, um, no matter where you are in life, you can turn the corner, and you can turn your life around, and you can change your life. So
So
I can
I wanted
definitely.
to share this something along those lines. Don, it was called you Don, I meant you.
It's okay.
Okay. I had this prayer that God give me to pray over my 15-year-old because he was so arrogant. He was like starting on 3 varsity sports and tall, good looking, and just constantly letting me know how I was failing as a parent. And I said, I love him because he's my son, but I don't really like him much. And God was like, here's the prayer I want you to pray. And so that story isn't about that. Well, but it was, the prayer I prayed was, help me to see him as you see him, and help me to love him as you love him. And for years now, I mean, now he's like 40, but for years I would think, I should pray that for myself. But I'm not going to, because either I will turn out to be so horrible that I'll be depressed, or that he thinks I'm so great that I'll get really prideful, right? So I didn't want to pray that prayer. And then in the last 6 months, I actually prayed that prayer and had this experience where he just kind of popped some pictures into my head, of how he saw me. And actually at one point wrapped me up kind of as I was meditating, like I was a child, except in my adult body. And I was like, I don't think that would work, because now we're like the same size, right? And he's like, I'm as big as I want, right? So he has me all wrapped up. And so I'm watching that, and I can feel like looking at me like a little baby. Okay, not perfect, just kind of this thing, and feeling his love. And I was kind of loving on me, and he handed me to me, and I loved myself. And it was the most amazing experience. I think it's the first time in my whole life I've ever loved myself. And it just spilled out to everyone. That love, I mean, for the next few weeks, wherever I went, whatever I was doing, I mean, whether it was the cashier and we have an extra long line because the cashier was very slow, or whatever, I just loved everybody. Like, oh my gosh, we're all kind of screw ups in our own way, and yeah, we're great.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah. And,
was it was
it
wonderful
truly
to have
is.
that feeling. It was just wonderful to think, oh, so you can ask for that. That's the message there. Can actually ask for that. That I usually talk about that prayer in the sense of how it can change relationships. We've used it in our marriage. I've used it with people I work with. I've just, used it in situations in the public. Help me to see these people as you do, and to love them as you do. And it's like shackles will fall off my eyes, and I'll just see what he sees. We're beautiful to him.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is amazing. And I think if we all, it seems that we're all very quick to judge others, and very, very slow to just love one another for who we are. And yeah, it's pretty special. And like you said, even to love ourselves, that seems to be very difficult for human beings to grasp, to love ourselves. So what, you know with the books, it's as you were talking about how you wrote the books, and it's very similar to my most recent book, um, the Journey of My Mother's Son, Volume 1, which is going to be part of a series as well, where it was a lot of my blogs that I'd already published, to just kind of put them in order. So they're books that you can kind of, you could start in the middle and read backward, or read from the back, and however you want to read it, because they're all kind of these separate little stories, which makes it very, very interesting to read. So as you were kind of picking out, from your blogs, what to put in there, what was that process like for you? And when did you realize, okay, um, this is it, this is enough, this is what the book should be? Because even me, I'm continuing to write blogs now, but there had to come a point where it's okay, this is what's going to make it in the book, and then we move on from here. So how was that process for you?
Well, for me at the time, the two books kind of made sense because there was an end date. Like, I want you to take what you've had from here to there and make that a book. So I didn't feel the need to keep writing. And I specifically was looking for those stories that had to do with learning about God and learning about how to live what I like to call as instructions for a happy life instead of commandments. These are instructions for a happy life. Do this. And then the second one on the missions, I was writing emails home to people, and I would usually put a story and a thought in there. And people would say, yeah, I shared it at church. So those stories then became the second book easily, because there was a beginning and an end to those missions. And there were specific things that I learned on those missions. And then the one with the marriage, I think I thought it had an end, and like you think, oh, this would be a better end. Oh, now this has happened. This would be a better end. So I have to like stop. No, this is it. It's done. And the interesting thing about that marriage is I really did feel like God said to me, now you're going to meet someone in the fall. This was in February, the next fall, and that you're going to marry. And but the word, he never puts commas, like he's talking to you, don't know. So you're going to meet the man you're going to marry in the fall, which I took to mean we were getting married in the fall, but actually we just met in the fall. We got married later. It's like, could you like how people talk to their dictating machine, comma, keep going like that, right? But so you would think, oh, match made in heaven, right? Like match made in heaven. And you meet those people, we never argue. No, we argued all the time. It was horrible. The first year or two was really bad. And I thought, we don't have children together. I like, should I really stick this out? Because this is tough. My grandfather was an alcoholic. We didn't have it in our family, in our home, my specific home that I grew up in, lots of aunts and uncles, things like that. But I like to say, for a lot of people who grew up in alcoholic homes, they end up married to alcoholics and becoming alcoholics, right? But that didn't happen. What I do is marry sons of alcoholics. That's what I do. So there I was, my first marriage, son of an abusive man who had been would have been, but gave it up at some point. And then this second husband, whose dad definitely was an abusive alcoholic. And I was trying to look at the differences between the two marriages. And then I said to God, I need a promise from you. I just need something I can hang on. I'm not going to call it a promise, a scripture. Scripture verses help me a lot to get through specific times. And I just need some kind of scripture that I can say to myself when I'm in this way of thinking right now. Like, this was a big mistake. And I could walk away at any time, no kids. And so the promise I got was this: all will be made whole as a result of this marriage. And so that book is about the healing that came about not only for us, but our children as we kind of worked our way through issues. And whole in the scriptures is talking, when Christ used the word whole, like thy faith hath made thee whole, that word is referring to spiritual and emotional wellness, not just physical wellness, right? So that is what I held on to, that got us there.
Yeah, and I can't even fathom the meshing of 15 children, regardless of whether they were,
Never, because we were older. They were older. The last two at home are my two youngest, and they were the only two who lived in the house with us. The others were, married or almost married and in college, or since he's 10 years older than I, his children were older. So yeah, I mean, it's not just the kids, it's the grandkids.
right?
I meet people that have 3 grandkids. I'm like, oh, what would that be like? I bet you buy them gifts. Our grandkids, we have 38 and they're married, a lot of them. We have like 24 great grandchildren. So we're like, okay, if you add up everybody we have to send birthday cards to and gifts, it's 106 people right now, 106. So let me just say, we're not giving them $100 gifts. we're not doing that.
Yeah.
That's your other grandparents.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot for sure. So, Margaret, anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to talk about before I get to my final question?
No, I do think that the younger you are when you start this, and actually it doesn't matter how old you are either, because I know people in their 70s who started it. But I think, gosh, I wish I'd started this in my 20s. What do you want me to do today, God? How different the world would be.
Right. Yeah, that's for sure. So how can people get your books, find out more about what you do? Where can they find you at on the internet?
Okay, so my website is inhisfootsteps.com, and the links to the 2 books and the audiobooks are there. I just finished the second book is an audio. It'll be available in a couple of weeks. And I have a newsletter. When's this going out, do you think, Dan?
It'll probably be September.
Okay. So when I put it up on Audible, I get like 25 free that I can give away. And that'll be in the newsletter, in the September newsletter. So that is on my website, pops up a little, it doesn't cover the whole screen, where you can sign up, and I will tell a story and a little bit about how the books are coming. And I like to say, you're not going to get spam because I'm too old and tired. You have the one a month. That's it. Okay.
There you go. There you go. I love it. So that brings me to my final question, which, as you know, the subtitle of the podcast is Many Little People in Many Little Places, which comes from the opening lyrics of a Michael Franti song, Gloria,
Right.
which go, when many little people in many little places do many little things, then the whole world changes. Well, it's one of the little things that Margaret does on a daily basis to make the world a little bit better place.
As I said, I ask what God wants me to do. And often I want you to call this person, or take a meal, or just show up. And more than once, someone has said, I have been praying. I have been praying. And then you brought me what I needed. Do we have time for a little short story, or are we done?
No, we absolutely have time for a little short story.
So the other day, I was thinking about a woman in my church whose husband is like in a wheelchair. And they're older. She's having to take care of him physically. And he kept going into the hospital and back. And while she's doing this, she's running people over, giving them rides places and taking them to the doctor. And I'm thinking, she is an angel. I think I want to do something for her, God. I'm thinking I'm going to take her something she can have for dinner, because who knows when she has time to cook. And I make a pretty good chicken noodle soup. By the way, I should tell you, I hate to cook. So if I bring you food, it's like out of love, pure love, because I hate to cook. And I was going to do it on a Thursday because she lives about a half hour away. And I could feel God say, well, what I want you to do is take her chocolate cake. And I thought, doesn't she have diabetes? I was like, all right. And then I said, well, then if it's a specific thing, is there a specific day? He says, no, go ahead, take it on Thursday. Thursday's a good day. So I did make her from scratch a chocolate cake with some kind of whipped cream chocolate icing. And then I called to tell her, because I knew she was, a believer in God. I said, I need to tell you, I'm bringing you something. I want to make sure you're going to be home. I can tell you what it is. But when you see it, don't blame it on me. Okay. This is what God said for me to bring to you. Okay. I just want you to know that. So I showed up. I mean, can you imagine how God manages to work through me? I don't know. So you're a much better person, I'm sure. So I show up at her house, and she's just kind of sitting in her chair, knocking on her door. And she's, come in. I bring it. I'm like, see, here it is. Chocolate cake. God sent you this. And then since I have whipped cream on it, I said, can I put it in your refrigerator? And she said, sure. And she's kind of not saying much. We talked a little bit about her husband. And she's just kind of looking at me. And then I left. And later she told another friend, she said, I was so down and depressed and discouraged. And I was grieving my mother, because her mother had just died in the last year. And it was particularly hard on her that day because it was her mother's birthday, Thursday. And the next day, Friday, was her father's birthday, and he's also gone. And I mean, their favorite cake was chocolate. And so I walk in with this chocolate cake from God and telling her this is from God. And so she said, I just felt so uplifted and so loved. And so those are tiny things. And that's, I have to say, that's what I do. I have not been called to be Mother Teresa in India. I've been called to bring chocolate cake to my diabetic neighbor. No, I've been called to do what God knows will bring them peace and happiness.
I love that. And I love that you listen as well as you do. That's an incredible gift. I think he speaks to all of us. I don't think we all listen. So it's an incredible gift. So folks out there listening, be sure to check out my other podcasts and blogs at journeymymotherson.com or danclouser.com. Margaret, again, I really appreciate you having this conversation. It was a lot of fun, and I think a lot of people get inspiration out of this for sure.